In this video, I'm going to be philosophizing on superstitions and or supernaturalisms within spiritual narcissism. Spiritual narcissism is more likely to result in the cults and or genocides and or serious criminality that may be underreported from individuals whom are superficially claiming to be more related, not necessarily connected, yet more related to God-gods and or the divine, whom may claim to hold supernatural and or superstitious secret self-knowledge and or self-awareness no other individual would have, nor possibly could have. Unique to their existentia, with often exaggerated and or inflated claims with gaps in meaningful information, more likely to be inconsistent and or inappropriate, including often inappropriately attempting to satisfy their own selfish, essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs, including attempting to have sex and or engage romantic relationships, yet mostly the former, as individuals whom tend to be more narcissistic, including the spiritual narcissists, are more likely to engage certain irrationalities in terms of their communications as to avoiding the meaningful romantic relationships they may desire, yet whom within their insecurities, engaging more of the insula with imperfections and or rigidities, that they engage more self-shaming, not necessarily guilt, as guilt is more meaningful to engage the appropriate future-oriented solutions to conflicts that they are more likely to avoid engaging self-shaming with partial and in some cases severe impairments and or deficiencies and or disabilities in terms of their self-knowledge and or self-awareness that truly prevent them from solving conflicts within their existentia that are meaningful to satisfy their most meaningful, desired, relevant, and or appropriate, essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs within certain situations, and or in terms of connecting with certain individuals they may desire to be in a relationship with, whom may instead engage in more superficial sexual relationships and or desires to engage in sexual relationships without romance and or intimacy, whom are more likely to experience sexual dissatisfaction and or whom also have impairments in terms of their sexual performance, whom other sex partners may more likely report in terms of the individuals who may have engaged in sexual contact with these individuals, resulting from their impairments to process positive, meaningful emotions and or recognize positive, meaningful affects that engages the most deeper connections and or intimacy within sexual intercourse that is counterproductive in terms of attempting to avoid intimacy whatsoever, that impairs and or results in deficiencies and or disabilities within sexual intercourse, and are more likely to experience sexual dysfunctions, including porn addiction, from having the inappropriate satisfaction of their underlying psychological needs. They are forced to, as a result of their own coercions, engage in the inappropriate partial satisfactions elsewhere, to the detriment of their being, who may claim that God-gods desire for this one unique individual to sleep for them personally, yet they may not desire themselves and had a clear discussion with God-gods whom had personally told them that they need to have sex and or sleep with X individual, engaging more spiritual narcissism with certain often confabulations, who may include within their communications to have supernatural powers, being able to read other minds and or know others' desires, whom had one confronted and or communicated more clearly would have serious impairments and or deficiencies and or disabilities to accurately and or correctly identify what is truly within one's subjectivity. Impossible to truly hold the self-knowledge and or self-awareness in terms of inferring another subjectivity, as one may truly uniquely only ever experience their own subjectivity. That is the most marked symptom of the spiritual narcissist, whom is engaging the totalitarian personality characteristics, desiring for total control of other individuals within the spurious relationships that they communicate in terms of their meaningful utterances of thought, derived from dogmatic assumptions that are unique to the superstitions and or supernaturalisms that they cultivate within their subjectivity, that results often in various psychological dysfunctions, not uniquely the poor performance within sex and or sexual dysfunctions that they suffer from severely, and that result in serious impairments to their physical and or psychological health, as well to physical and or psychological well-being, that derive from the derived origin of their impairments and or deficiencies and or disabilities, whom resort to counterproductive coercions of others to satisfy their essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs, including for food and or drink, who may struggle in terms of satisfying those needs and or may resort mostly to various inappropriate substances of abuse, most likely to abuse alcohol, as alcohol is the most abused substance, and or in terms of individuals whom are more religious, most likely to be abused by individuals whom are not uniquely religious, yet are spiritual narcissists, whom you are more likely to identify as they tend to be more overweight and or suffer from chronic disease associated with obesity, with more inflammation in the self related to engaging counterproductive, impaired and or deficient and or disabled navigations of one's meaningful utterances of thought, filled with vagnesses arising from the superstitions and or supernaturalisms that within the core of those supernaturalisms and or superstitions is spurious relationships, connecting random component parts and or processes without the valid and or psychological true and or meaningful satisfactions of the meaningful criteria in order to constitute what works in terms of one's communications, appropriate to engage healthy psychological functioning meaningful utterances of thought. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one. Keep those up.